ones you think the fans will identify the most, why they should be excited?
So, obviously there's a little something for everyone in terms of like the full character range. I'm a huge fan of just DC and Justice League, so like being able to cast Kevin Conroy, being able to cast George Newborn, being able to cast just Wonder Woman overall, looking at them and sort of just seeing here's the sort of starting core. They weren't the first character developed like that. It's more like saying, if this is the first folks you're actually going to start with, what does that sort of radiate out from for each IP? So, Game of Thrones, this could be Jon Snow, this could be Arya. Kind of Barbara, that could be Yogi, that could be Jabberjaw, that could be a bunch of the other characters. Really being able to kind of go through and figure out what fantasy will be served by this character and what fantasy is going to basically entice that fan and that player the most. That's typically where we actually dive in and say, all right, we think this is a better field, we think this is a better field, and kind of go from there. Again, we believe in representation, we believe in diversity, we believe in inclusion. All of our IP run the gamut of that, like through our 99 history. So being able to sort of bring that and express that, very, very important.
There's some characters that you had, like Arya Stark was a huge one that I was excited for. Was there certain characters that was harder to get onto the roster?
Not necessarily. Like, it's one of those cases where, like, as a fellow huge Arya Stark fan, we were just really excited to be able to get and work with Maisie, and she was amazing. So it's one of those cases where when we look at the roster and who can be in it, it's a long list. So it's good times.
For player first games, a lot of industry veterans on that team, but at the studio, their first rodeo.
Yep.
How did that relationship come about, and what makes them the right team for this project?
So the team basically is both, like, really, like, I can gush about these guys all day, so I'll try and narrow it down to like one or two things. I think the very first thing is that there is an understanding of how you have to treat a player base, period. That understanding comes at different levels and comes at different scales. It's very different to treat a player base of 1,000 versus a player base of 100 million. The core of the studio pretty much comes from Watkins. League of Legends, that's one of the most popular games in the history of gaming, basically. Understanding sort of that pedigree and understanding what they really bring to the table is a player-first mentality, literally player-first mentality, as well as just insane amounts of creative output and creative sort of solutions to different problems we have, not just design. So in working with the team, and really it's been just a fantastic relationship, and watching the team both not just grow, but sort of excel, exceed, and finally the game, being able to come out and all sort of celebrate that reception has been pretty fantastic.
Okay, so this is one for characters. Is there anyone that you haven't added that you're like looking forward to in the future?
That's a loaded question. Because if I answer it, you will have a character. So I'll say we're here today to talk about the current roster. We have a lot of characters coming, and I'm excited about basically all of them. I grew up watching a lot of these shows. I grew up literally like running home at 2 o'clock to get home to watch On Leather Wings from Batman animated series. Like, I didn't know there was a new Batman series coming out until someone literally at school was like, "Are you going to see the new Batman?" I was like, "What do you mean? It starts in 10 minutes." Gone. So when we talk about that kind of thing, I love art. When I look at, say, Garnett's songs, like just watching them on YouTube and saying, she has a line she says to Batman where she sings it, and it's, "I think you're just mad because you're single." So for those that know Steven Universe and sort of understand that, it's one of those cases where it's just ecstatic. So if you're sensing that this is a hard question to answer, yeah, it is, because I love them all, and because we can really sort of say, okay, who is next, and it's a real question and conversation, sky's the limit. It's going to be fun.
Sorry. So sorry. What's the next one?
What can you tell us about the fighting moves? Because, you know, obviously some of these characters, you know, like the superheroes, lend themselves more easily than others. You know, in the case of like Shaggy, for example. Yeah. So what can you talk about the challenge of that? Maybe some of your favorite moves.
So I'll say, obviously, we have a lot of characters with, we'll say, very easily to imagine how this character will fight in fighting games. And other ones, not so much. So again, with Velma, her thing is the brain. Like, she's not going to get in and that's not her. It's not her style at all. At the same time, the core of her skills comes from her being really smart, helping her team, and that unbelievable sass. So she literally attacks you in game with sass. Like, she shouts out word bubbles, the sass hits you, etc., etc. So it's a very completely different sort of way to actually interpret, well, what would a detective actually play like in those games? It's like different in genre. She has a passive ability called Snoop. Snooping basically has you collect like little miniature clues around the map. When you get 5, what does Velma do when it's time for the episode and we figured out who the villain is? She calls the police. So she calls the police on you in game. It reveals you as Old Man Jenkins. The cop car comes to get you and traps you for a little while and attempt to drive your ass off the stage if you don't try and get out of it. That basically is like, wait, this is a Scooby-Doo episode. Yes. Like, exactly. So understanding, like, again, like, this goes back to the creativity we were talking about. Understanding that's how we sort of interpreted what would be being a detective is like. That's a lot of that, yeah. Sometimes the ideas don't work, but most of the time we've been able to at least push them to a state where they do, or we've been able to find something else that does work. So it's a lot of work, it's a lot of process, but we think we've been doing pretty good so far.
What was, when you were coming up with the roster, were there pairs of characters that were together that you were like looking forward to, like, didn't expect to love their interactions more?
So there were some surprising interactions. Maisie actually mentioned one, because when she came in, she was like, she didn't necessarily know what kind of game it was at first, and we actually told her. And she was like, I have to insult Bugs Bunny. I was like, no, you are Arya Stark, this is Bugs Bunny, you must murder him. So just sort of seeing a lot of that interaction, and obviously our players have picked up on a lot of it. That's actually one of the moments that will make us laugh out loud at some of the lines. Like, Bugs actually does have a line towards Arya where he actually will the North remember that after knocking her out. So it's like it gets interesting, and some of those cuts get pretty deep. So it's good times.
What role do you see original characters playing on this roster in and amongst all these iconic IPs?
So Rain Dog is a unique element. He's a unique character, obviously, because he's built before the actual title. And it's one of those cases where him in particular, he is 100% based around co-op. So as a way for basically new folks to actually get into the title and things like that, that's also a very good character to just play as, because it gets you used to basically protecting your teammate, always being aware of your teammate, working with your teammates, so on and so forth. So if there's ever a need like that that has to be addressed in the future, we take a look at it. For now, I think we're going to be focused much more sort of full. Lots and lots of folks. Good? Thank you, everybody. Indeedy. Yep.